Hello, my amazing friend Harrison. So great to see you. Good morning, because I know you said you're just waking up. So thank you so much for being with me today.
It's a pleasure, Sandee. As I was doing my morning routine, I had you in my mind's eye. I was like, oh, I can't wait to hold space with this beautiful woman again. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. Now tell everybody where you're from.
If it wasn't obvious by the lovely accent, I'm from Australia. I live down under on the East Coast.
Love it. And as I told you the last time I spoke on your podcast, at one of these years, I will be coming to Australia to see the US or the Australian Open, and I will make sure to get together with you. And
I'm on the road. I'm on the road. We'll set it up, and it's interesting because the Australian Open's down south in the Melbourne area, and I'm up north. But that road trip from where I am down to Melbourne's really lovely. So we'll make it happen.
Let me guess, how many hours is it? Is it a long trip?
I'd say just over a day, over 24 hours. Yep.
You know, and I feel like we know that obviously in the United States, it's a big country, but sometimes you go somewhere, like my husband and I recently visited Napa, California on a vacation. And we have friends that live in California, and we're like, hey, we're in Napa. Can you guys, meet us? We're trying to figure it out. And then I was like, wait, I forget, where do you live? And they're like, oh, about 7 hours from there. And I'm like, oh my God, no, don't.
Well,
don't
Sandee,
bother. It's okay. We'll see each other another time. You're like,
I think a big part of that, and maybe you can relate to this, in this sort of health realm, and even like mental, emotional, and spiritual health realm, we spend so much time not really looking at physical distance, right? We know that, we're on the other side of the world to each other, but we feel each other almost as if we're in the same room.
Yeah.
So when those actual physical distance come in, we're like, oh, that is a thing still.
Well, because I have to laugh at myself, because when you think about it, it's like, oh, you're from Australia? I know somebody from Australia. Their name is this. And you're like, yeah.
You must know them.
Yeah, you must, because you're from Australia, so you must know them.
Yeah.
I know. The joys of, wow. Okay. So, Harrison, I love hearing people's story. And when I was on your podcast, we really only talked about me, mostly me. Thank you very much. So this is all about you today. So tell me your story. How did you get to be the beautiful light worker that you are?
Well, Sandee, just to throw you some love, I could listen to your beautiful voice all day too, my friend. So I know it's a podcast thing to say, but it's such a pleasure to hear you speak. So all good. We could do more episodes hearing about your story, but about me, I spend a lot of time currently at my current age, in this current point in my journey. I spend a lot of time doing a lot of healing work across mostly emotional and spiritual worlds, and my story connects heavily to that. I, at a younger age, went through a bit of a abrupt spiritual awakening. Before that, I grew up in a pretty relatively, and I am using my fingers here for the audio listeners, normal household. But that normal household left me as a young man wanting more. And I grew up in my adolescence. So going back even further, so childhood and then moving into my adolescence, I sort of stepped out into the world. I call it stepping into the externalization of the self, where I spent a lot of my time looking outside of myself for answers, right? Whether it be through beautiful traveling, whether it be through, dating and women, whether it be through alcohol, whether it be through drugs. At a time, these things served me, but very quickly I ended up hitting a wall, and, long story cut short, I had to go inwards, and that's what led to the spiritual awakening and much of the work that I do now.
I love it. So how long when did that happen? You said it was in your adolescence. So
yeah, so
we're talking 10 years.
Yeah. So it began.
You look very young, so I don't know.
Yeah. So I would say the beginning of the hero's journey for me started at, 16, 17. And then I hit my dragon at the age of 25, 24.
Yeah, I was about, we have very similar similar journeys, because that's kind of when things started going downhill for me, was about the same age. Or I gave into those impulses rather.
Yeah.
And then I was right about the same age when I hit my wall.
Yeah.
I was 24 years old. Yeah.
What'd you do? What was that? I know we talked about it a little bit, but was it an inwards experience for you, going inwards?
Well, for me, I mean, I was, I was abusing cocaine.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate in that nothing horrible happened. It was just, stayed out all night.
Yeah.
Fiance was worried. No, I'm not with another man. Okay, let me tell you, I've been doing a lot of cocaine. And so that's kind of, he basically gave me an ultimatum. And so that's when my journey began.
Yeah.
Because when you, as you know, when you clear your mind of all of that and you start looking inward, that's when the true growth happens.
Yeah. And I'm sure you talk about this a lot, Sandee, but just for people that maybe are new to this kind of archetype or story or journey, the fact that we share this in common, I don't think that's a coincidence, right? I think we all have this progression, right? It's why Joseph Campbell calls it the hero's journey, because we all move through this kind of expansion. I think the question that we need to ask is, are we consciously aware of it or not? Because if we're unconsciously moving through it, I think we can fall into a victim, and we can feel like we're sort of being punched in the head and moving through life without really taking conscious control and realizing, oh, there's some things here that are happening for me instead.
Yeah, that's right. And that took me a very, very long time to really grasp. And it's okay for listeners out there that can't see a situation in their life the way you just described it, which is, it didn't happen to me, it happened for me. Yeah. It can take time. And so if you're not there yet, it's okay, because you will get there at some point. It takes time, and you'll get there when you're supposed to get there. Yep. Is really, you can't force it. Because that wouldn't be a good idea either.
Yeah, and just that brings in the spiritual lens, Sandee. That brings in, the more work I do around this, both on myself and with people I get to support, the more that I realize that, yes, there are similar themes that connect us, that sort of bring us together in relationships and help us relate to other people. At the same time, we also have a unique soul, right? We have a unique soul that has a unique blueprint that it may take, 15 years, it may take 30 years, it may take 40 years, but that's okay, because that's your unique blueprint, right?
Yeah, for sure. And at the same time, to be able to get to that point, you have to peel a lot of layers off,
Yeah.
and that can take a lot of time, for sure. Yeah. I just pulled up your bio, and I see that my mission is pulling back the layers of the onion, restricting health, alignment, and love.
You got it.
That's right. So let's dive in a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
So when you're working with somebody and you need, walk me through how you do that to help people pull those layers back so that they can bring more health and alignment and love back into their reality.
Yeah. So it's funny. I was having a conversation about this yesterday with a beautiful podcast listener of my show, and she was commenting about, at the start of my show, I always that's my tagline, right? The pulling back the layers, restricting health, alignment, and love. And she messaged me and said, "You should have a T-shirt. This is a really good tagline. If this is not your why, it should be." I was like, yes, it very, very much is my why. And I think a big part of it for me is the more work that I've done with other people, the more I realized I'm not giving them anything. When someone comes to me for healing or coaching or support or, coming back to those inner spaces, that alignment, that love, that health, every single time it's a deeper realization that my role is to be a beautiful mirror. My role is to be, in the best way possible, a smudge-free mirror that reflects back to them the truth that's been inside them the whole time. But unfortunately, most of us have, as you've said with this bio outline, that truth is there, but there are a lot of layers of disconnection on top that make us feel unworthy, that make us feel broken, that make us feel traumatized, that make us feel disconnected. So to answer your question, I think the first place to start is really having that conversation with people. And even if they don't intellectually understand it or feel it in their body, it's really setting that framework going forward, right? Because if we live in a world, and I've grown up moving out of this mindset where it's so easy for us to put our power outside of ourselves, right? To think that that doctor, that coach, that practitioner, that therapist we become codependent with them, right? And this is me not saying that we don't need support, but we need to realize that the power is inside of us, and it's always a remembering, not a gaining. So I think that's step number one, and then we sort of get more specific from there.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. I love that because, I mean, really, that's anything that we do. It's a choice that we make, and it has to come from within. And that includes, peeling those layers back.
Yeah.
And while having a coach or a therapist is so valuable because you have somebody to bounce, to verbalize it, right? Because you need it's verbalizing that. Yep. Yeah. Just, you don't want to be codependent because at the end of the day, it has to come from you.
Yeah. And, after that sort of first step is taken, that you understand that framework, the next step is you, right? Because we can understand something, and this is where sort of you bring in the masculine and feminine energies that we are, right? I can, from a sort of feminine energy, understand what you just said or what Harrison said, right? I can understand that the power is inside of me and that I am the solution and I need to do the self-love, self-caring work. But if I then don't take action to implement that more in my life, it's going to stay as a concept. It's not going to embody itself through me. So just for people listening, step one is the awareness, but step two is taking action, right? Taking action and doing the thing that is needed. So for me, for example, I spend a lot of time talking about the inner child, right? And the inner child, I think, is a very actionable thing that people can start doing to make steps back into this space of inner connection, because a lot of us are disconnected from our inner child. A lot of us are disconnected from that beautiful little being that is inside of us, that is an embodiment of creation, an embodiment of play, an embodiment of pleasure, and all of these wonderful things.
Yeah. So let's go back to the inner child. What can you give somebody, because you just said, you can start working on that. Can you give someone an example of something that they can do on a daily basis to get back in touch with that?
Yeah. So a big one that I use a lot, a practical tool that has definitely different layers of what I want to say, release that occur. So as I'm about to share this, I just want to put this disclaimer for people listening. Take this slowly, and if you need help with this, reach out to someone. But a big practical tip that you can start to do to connect to the inner child is a love letter to yourself. And it's writing. Many of us, myself included, have been through trauma in our childhood, right? And that trauma is part of those layers that restrict that light and that truth from our power from being shared with the world, right? So one of the things we can do is we can start to write a love letter to that beautiful little inner child. And the goal is to not re-traumatize and not go back and relive that event. It's to actually release both the suppressed emotion and rewrite the stories and the beliefs that we created around that traumatic event, right? Because many of us, when we experience a painful event like this, it's often not the event itself that causes the prolonged disconnection or the prolonged pain. It's either A, the suppressed emotion around it, or B, the negative story that we've created, right? So
exactly.
if I've been abandoned as a child by one of my caregivers, right, there's most likely I've created a story that I'm not valuable, that I should not be seen, right? That people don't care for me. Whenever whenever I step out into the world, right, I'm going to be left alone again. So with this practical tip here, just to answer your question, the letter can now be a vehicle and a vector to start to rewrite these stories and release the emotion around it.
To go back to your example, you were abandoned as a child. And for somebody that's going to write a letter, so let me just make sure. I want to elaborate on it a little bit. Please. To make sure that people understand that. Because yes, when you're abandoned like that, if that were to happen, we're just using this as an example.
Yep.
You're going to be like, yeah, I'm not worthy. I don't matter, fill in the blanks. So when you're talking about rewriting a story and writing a letter,
yeah,
you rewriting the story would be, yes, this happened and I am still loved and I am worthy.
Yeah.
And this is about that person, not me. Yeah. It had nothing to do with me. And that's what the rewriting of the story does. So that because unless you confronted this person, you don't really know why they left you, right?
Yeah.
Because chances are not going to say, you know what, I didn't like you as a little boy, and so I just wanted to leave you. No, right?
Yeah.
That's not what happened. So rewriting that story is giving in your mind, you're going to look back and be like, yeah, it's okay. It was okay. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it still happened. It's just now I'm going to look at the situation with love and know that I'm still okay, even though that did happen to me.
Yeah, you nailed it, right? And what I would add to that is, going back to the other person, what that allows you to do is to lean into forgiveness.
Yes,
it's forgiveness is such a big part of inner child healing and emotional work in general, but especially around inner child healing. It starts to help you realize, one, we're not detaching from any responsibility that they need to take for their actions, but we are seeing that, again, the healing begins with us, right? If we're constantly attached to the person that was involved in the incident, then we're stopping ourselves from healing, right? We're staying in that victim archetype, and there's no judgment just for people out there that if you're finding yourself in this. But what I'm telling you, as someone who has been in this archetype, you can't heal, right? Because you're constantly, again, looking outside of yourself for that thing to change. And you have to realize that it's not going to change unless you go back inside. So it's releasing attachment to the external, forgiving yourself, right? And stepping into the healing power that you deserve.
Wow. So beautifully said. So beautifully said. So with this letter, someone's going to write a letter. How often do they read that letter back? Like, is it a practice that you would say, like, read this letter every day and practice the forgiveness? Like, is there like a routine around that?
So for me, how I do this with people that come to see me is it's very intuitive based, right? So it's going to depend on the person, right? So especially when you start talking about this emotional and spiritual kind of healing, we all have our own context, right? So the story that I just gave around being abandoned, I'm sure many people out there can either relate to that, or maybe they have something, I'm using my fingers here, more extreme or less extreme. So, and the reason I put my fingers is that we never want to compare stories, right? Our trauma, our pain is our pain.
Right.
But with that said, it does impact us at an individual level based off where we are in our life, either in a more impactful way or in a less impactful way. So to answer your question, you're going to know whether you need to read that letter, every week, or if it's something more intense where you're going to have to really drop in every day. For example, if that is you, then I would actually, you could do the letter every day, but I would actually rather take a step back and replace the letter with affirmations, right? You gave examples of what those affirmations can look like in the letter, but what you could do is write the letter, take out those loving affirmations of truth, the real truth of what you are. You are abundant, you are loved, you are powerful, you are worthy, right? And put that on your mirror. And put that on in your bathroom mirror. So every morning when you wake up, you're now repeating the real truth of reality. And then maybe later in the day, you do connect into that letter itself.
I love that. That's really great. That's really, really great. And as with anything we're doing, whether it's you're training to run a race, or you're an athlete, you have to practice your game. You're a doctor practicing medicine. You know, I always say happiness is a practice. You have to practice happiness. You have to practice self-love. It's not it's not a one and done kind of thing. And self-love is no different, especially when we have so many, negative thoughts and we're hard on ourselves.
Yes.
I mean, I'm a happiness coach.
Yeah.
I'm still hard on myself. Of course I am. We all are. And it's okay.
I'll just say, I think I love the muscle analogy of this. But
Yes.
Something that, as you were explaining that, another image that I got, and I think it's also connected to the fact that the sun is rising here in Australia, so the sun is hitting my face. I see it as it's a sun inside of you that's slowly getting more bright, right? Because let me be very clear with my words. Again, going back to what I said before, you are not gaining something here. You are awakening a truth that's been there the whole time, right? Whether that truth is I am loved, whether that truth is I am worthy, whether that truth is I am powerful, whether that truth is I deserve abundance, right? Whatever it is, in my experience, all of those things are your innate birthrights. But based off our experience, our human experience, and these traumas and these pains and these challenges, these layers, right? They stack up on that truth. But so an analogy you could use is that every single day as you do these exercises, you're allowing that sun and its light to embody through you more fluently. Right. And so you can then not just share it with yourself, more aspects of your being, but then you can decide to share that with the world.
Love it. So just profound. This has been such a great conversation. And I wish we had hours and hours to sit here and talk, but
you got the tennis to go to, my friend. You got the tennis waiting for you.
No. I just like to be respectful of my listeners because, I'm not Joe Rogan. Takes me a whole week to get through one of those podcasts. But is there anything else, because we have time, but is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you would like to share with the audience so that they know more about you?
Well, I just want to say I'm grateful for you, Sandee. Thank you for bringing me into your space and your environment. And, I truly think that we as souls on this journey, we run into other souls for a reason. And I'm glad that on this path, on this journey, I've run back into you again. So I just want to say, I love you, my friend, and thank you for having me. I will just say that I'll say two things. So first of all, just with this whole healing conversation that we've talked about today, for people listening, take your time with it, right? Don't just, I would say, take the action that's needed, but be patient and trust yourself and trust not just your thinking mind, but your intuition. So when you get a hit with someone, whether it's me, whether it's with beautiful Sandee or whoever you're connecting to, trust that intuition and take the step that is needed, but have patience, right? And give yourself that divine sort of love to take the step that's needed. I would say to people that are resonating with my voice and resonating with that step, you can reach out to me. My website is harrisonmeagher.com. That's Ma spelled Meagher. And I'm at the moment fluctuating between both group coaching and one-on-one coaching. So just reach out to me. And if you feel the call, we can do some deeper work together.
Love it. Love it. And I will make sure your website is in the show notes as well.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. This has been such a great conversation. And I know that there's going to be many people that heard what we had to say and are going to really, it's really going to impact some lives. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, my friend.